Hi, everyone. We'll begin the webinar in like a minute or so. We'll just wait for a few more people to join on.
Bonjour.
Nishi, if you want to begin, we can start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Is my audio still okay? Perfect. Okay. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on successful collaborations in museum and heritage studies and practice. My name is Nishi Bassi, and I'm a board member of ICOM Canada, and I have the absolute pleasure today of introducing you to our very esteemed speaker, Dr. Shabnam Inanloo Dailoo, who is going to be leading the webinar today. And I'm just going to give you a quick introduction and then hand the proverbial microphone over to her. And so I just want to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask Dr. Shabnam, please enter them in the chat box, and we'll have time for a quick Q&A towards the end of our chat today. So Dr. Shabnam Inanloo Dailoo is Associate Professor and Director of Heritage Resource Management and Associate Dean Strategic Initiatives within the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Athabasca University. She has 2 decades of national and international experience in heritage conservation theory and practice. She holds a PhD in environmental design from the University of Calgary, and she completed her postdoctoral research with the Canada Research Chair on Built Heritage at the University of Montreal. Her current research examines the existing policies, guidelines, and procedures in conservation and management of World Heritage Sites, heritage education in Canada, and heritage documentation and conservation and climate impact. Dr. Shabnam coordinated the 2022 International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property International Summer School on Teaching and Communication Skills in Conservation and Science. I think that's the longest sentence I've ever said out loud. She is the co-chair of the National Roundtable on Heritage Education and the Canadian chapter of the Association of Critical Heritage Studies. She was a board member of ICOM Canada until very recently, and currently serves as a governor of the National Trust for Canada, board member of ICOMOS Canada, a member of ICOMOS International Scientific Committee on Education and Training, and ICOM International Committee for the Training of Personnel. She is Athabasca University's focal point for the Climate Heritage Network. And with that, I will turn myself over to Dr. Shabnam.
Thank you very much, Nishi, for this very kind introduction. I thank ICOM Canada for this recognition. This indeed is such an honor to receive ICOM Canada's International Achievement Award, personally as a heritage professional and also as an academic. I would like to give my sincere thanks to those who nominated and supported me. Hello, everyone. I'm coming to you today from unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. I honor the people and land of Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. I recognize these territories' significance for the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation who lived and continue to live upon it, and thank them for its stewardship of the land. At Athabasca University, we respectfully acknowledge that we are on and work on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gifts of the Indigenous peoples and give thanks to them. And I would like also to take a moment and recognize all the Indigenous communities that we are reaching out today as part of this virtual webinar. I pay my respects to Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers, past, present, and emerging. I was asked to speak about my work and the new initiatives that I've been working and creating at Athabasca University. And it was really hard to choose one that I wanted to highlight today, but then I did my thinking and came up with the most suited one to talk about today. So as Nishi mentioned, I work at Athabasca University, and Athabasca University's Heritage Resources Management Program is appropriately housed within the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. The program covers a broad range of topics from heritage places to museums studies. From heritage collections and their conservation and interpretation, heritage policies and professional ethics, to planning, conservation, and management of historic places and cultural landscapes. The program is founded on a number of principles, and I want to quickly highlight a couple key elements here. So the heritage field constitutes a community of practice with many shared goals and objectives. And the second one is that the heritage resources management is founded on theoretical principles, but theory should not be understood apart from the community and social context of practice. Over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to initiate, plan, develop, and successfully develop a number of projects that linked Canadian museum and heritage practices and thinking to various international initiatives. I have had the pleasure of working with many colleagues in Canada who work in museums and historic sites. And I work to build partnerships between Athabasca University and other universities, as well as heritage organizations, not just in Canada, but also around the world. I wholeheartedly believe that what makes these projects successful was their collaborative nature. And that's the topic of the webinar that I proposed. Creating partnerships, working together with collaborators, and building relationships with communities are critical in advancing museum and heritage studies and practice. And that's the connection between theory and practical side of the heritage work. I hope you agree with me that the heritage field is collaborative and interdisciplinary in nature. It's people-driven, community-centered, and value-focused and value-based. I'm going to focus on collaboration for a moment and what I mean by it. I'm referring to various types of collaborations among different professional groups in the heritage field, those who are involved in the conservation and management of movable and immovable heritage, as well as tangible and intangible heritage. These groups are often informed by their academic backgrounds and disciplinary areas, and often tend to work in silos. However, the lines between these heritage categories, if I may, become blurred as we work with communities and learn about different worldviews and traditional ways of being, knowing, and doing things, and better understand the interconnectedness nature of the heritage work. I also mean collaboration among different levels of government, those who are responsible for decision-making and the protection of heritage. That is Indigenous, local, provincial, and territorial, and federal governing bodies, and oftentimes not nonprofit organizations. There are other types of collaborations in the heritage field that I have in mind. So it's between heritage professionals and practitioners and academics, educators, and trainers. Between seasoned and well-established professionals and emerging professionals. between elders, knowledge keepers, scholars, and researchers, and the youth and young learners. So I just want to add this in bracket here that the last 2 points could be also used for capacity building purposes and transfer of knowledge. All of that is not to indicate that all these groups have to come together for any given heritage-related project. Of course, the nature and scope of the heritage projects and the context determine the level of involvement and collaboration, who should be involved, and when, and for what purposes, and what's the outcome of their involvement. So that was just a preamble to what I wanted to talk about really here, and that's to discuss a project that showcases that it's indeed possible to collaborate with as many groups as possible within a project. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the work of ICOM, the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, which is based in Rome, Italy. ICOM is an intergovernmental organization working in service to its members to promote the conservation of all forms of cultural heritage in every region of the world. So that's what's written in the website. Canada is a member state of ICOM since 1978. So we have a very long history with ICOM. In partnership with ICOM, Athabasca University hosted a training program in St. Albert, Alberta in July 2022. It was a long road to reach there. As you probably remember, we had to go through a pandemic before that and learn how to meet again in person after a couple of years of being only virtual. I had the pleasure of coordinating the 2022 ICOM International Summer School on Communication and Teaching Skills in Conservation and Science. This training, this ICOM International Summer School, is a 2-week training program that explores innovative and effective modalities of learning and teaching core concepts of heritage conservation and science. And again, we say heritage in the broadest way possible, including tangible, intangible, movable, and immovable heritage. In close collaboration with Parks Canada, the Government of Alberta's Heritage Division, including Royal Alberta Museum, Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology, and Provincial Archives of Alberta, and St. Albert Arts and Heritage Foundation, our NGO in St. Albert, which includes St. Albert Art Gallery, Musée Heritage Museum, and St. Albert Historic Sites. The summer school brought together academics and professionals in the heritage field to examine creative and alternative approaches to learning about conservation and science, while studying existing field practices and the theoretical frameworks that exist in heritage. The summer school was supported also by an international teaching team with backgrounds in heritage conservation and restoration, heritage theory and policy, cultural landscapes, chemistry, archaeology, and digital learning. Very diverse indeed. As well as Athabasca University's Indigenous Center, Nuxkatawin, which means meeting place in Cree, and the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences. So it was a large group of people who supported this project. Canadian heritage professionals, academics, and Indigenous elders and partners were involved in the training as appropriate, which promoted the exchange of knowledge and expertise among Canadian and international participants. Broader members of the heritage community were also engaged during the training to ensure that everyone had the opportunity to connect and collaborate with a wide range of Canadian heritage educators and professionals. Drawing on the expertise of the participants themselves, as well as local and international specialists, activities were structured to ensure relevance to current events and emerging topics. The program also provided opportunities for participants to visit museums and heritage institutions in Alberta, where they were able to observe the application of themes in practice and hear firsthand from experts working in those organizations and institutions. The overarching themes of the summer school were sustainability, climate action, zero waste. The second one was Indigenous cultural teachings. And the third was digital teaching and learning. These themes were determined based on priorities of different collaborating organizations and partners. ICOM is committed with sustainable development and aligns its work with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So the theme of sustainability, climate action, zero waste was developed to support Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly number 12, which is sustainable consumption, and number 13, climate action. Supporting these goals is a commitment made by ICOM in order to demonstrate how heritage conservation can play a part in building an equitable, inclusive, and peaceful future for people everywhere. So the summer school has been offered in the previous years, but the 2022 iteration of the summer school, the first one in Canada, incorporated Indigenous perspectives throughout the training, providing the participants with the opportunity to understand, acknowledge, and respect different worldviews and diverse cultural perspectives in the heritage field. The international participants learned about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report and its call to action. They actually took with them home copies of the booklet, the calls to action booklet, so they have a reference to go back to. It was the first summer school to integrate Indigenous cultural teachings theme into the overall program, which was really important for us in Canada. Working closely with AU's Indigenous Center, Nuxkatawin, and with the guidance of our elder in residence, a series of Indigenous teachings and learning sessions were offered throughout the training. Indigenous cultural knowledge was presented through circle discussions, hands-on activities, elder and knowledge holders talks, and the incorporation of art, food, dance, and music in the course activities. Staff from the Pound Makers Lodge, which is the site of a former residential school, and local Indigenous artists, including Cree and Métis artists, also supported the discussions on Indigenous cultural knowledge in a respectful, responsive, reflective, and reciprocal manner. Learning about Indigenous cultures and worldviews was a priority identified by all Canadian partners. At Athabasca University, for example, we are guided by our Nuxkatawin plan of engagement and its education bundle that includes respect, good relations, conciliation, and reciprocity. On the other hand, as noted in its Indigenous Connection website, and I quote, Parks Canada is committed to a system of national heritage places that recognizes and honors the historic and contemporary contributions of Indigenous peoples, their histories and cultures, as well as the special relationships Indigenous peoples have with the ancestral lands, waters, and ice, unquote. So as you can see, the incorporation of Indigenous cultural teachings into the program illustrates the value of those knowledges in the field of conservation and science, and the significance that education itself plays when working toward meaningful conciliation and reconciliation. And going back to the third theme, Athabasca University is a leader in open online education. Learning about the application of virtual platforms in teaching heritage conservation and science has become part of the ICOM International Summer School since 2016. Since then, a series of experimental courses and sharing spaces were developed as part of ongoing partnership between AU and ICOM in order to address the evolving need for online learning. So the third theme, digital teaching and learning, became the core theme of the summer school because of the impact of COVID-19 as well, and the subsequent changes in teaching practical topics and hands-on activities by using online digital platforms. So these three overarching themes inform the development of the content of the training. The summer school topics covered museums and collections, built heritage and cultural landscapes, of course, indigenous knowledges, archaeology and paleontology, intangible heritage, and scientific methods, among many others. The activities also emphasize the inherent interdisciplinary nature of heritage conservation and the complexity in conservation decision-making process. In addition to the core learning activities, the program also included visits to world-class heritage institutions and important sites. It wasn't just site visits. We did spend a lot of time learning from experts, working in those institutions, asking questions, and having really meaningful discussions after the visit as well. Selected guest speakers were also invited to present on topics relevant to the overarching themes of the summer school, such as developing architectural conservation assessment schemes, digital conservation of paleontological heritage resources, social and emotional aspects of learning, communicating heritage conservation to multiple audiences, and storytelling, collaboration, and communications. As you can see, it was very diverse and included different topics. On the other hand, the international participants were also provided with the opportunity to present on the recent challenges and opportunities working in the field and conducting research on heritage matters. And we had a really good exchange at those sessions, learning about their home countries and heritage matters in different parts of the world. In addition to that, social activities also were planned in a way to showcase the participants' professional and personal experiences. We had an international dinner. That was the highlight of the summer school. We really made wonderful memories at the international dinner. We cooked together and we talked about the importance of food in our cultures and heritage. And we actually talked about different customs, and we had our customs on, and we talked about food, and we actually danced as well as enjoying the meals. And one last important aspect of the program that I wanted to highlight here is that as an academic, it's really important to me to engage my students in projects that I have the privilege of working on as much as possible, and provide them with yet another learning opportunity that is outside of classroom or outside of a research project. And in this case, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them. I invited and engaged several of my students who are studying in the Heritage Resources Management program, and a few of the interns in the Historical Resources intern program. And they actually joined in, they made presentations, they contributed to the discussions, and also were part of a number of the course activities. I believe that emerging heritage professionals and the learners have to learn how to work within a team and with people from different cultural and disciplinary backgrounds and different professional experiences. They have to learn to acknowledge, understand, and respect different cultural perspectives, and that could not happen in a classroom. So reflecting on this project, I think I can say with more confidence now that we truly worked together as a team, inspired each other, and exchanged ideas that embrace diverse cultural perspectives, interdisciplinarity, and also critical thinking. We broke disciplinary silos, discussed together themes and difficult topics. Not all of the topics that we decided to cover were easy to talk about, as they related to museum collections and also heritage places in Canada and internationally. Indigenous and non-Indigenous partners and contributors, as well as established and emerging professionals, shared knowledge and supported group learning. And also, I cannot highlight enough that professionals and academics work together closely for this project. It was indeed a really unique experience working on this project. So this collaborative approach allowed for the international and Canadian participants to observe topics in practice while engaging with Canadian museums and heritage professionals actively working in the field. The result was that the program had a uniquely Canadian aspect and drew on the strength of Canadian and Indigenous methodologies for dissemination of knowledge, expertise, and experience on an international scale. The project was only possible because of the generous support of many, many international, national, provincial, and local organizations, museums, historic sites, and heritage places. I counted, and more than 90 individuals contributed to this training. This is not simple, but it's doable. It was doable. This would not either have been possible without the support, the ongoing support of my home faculty, my home university, and different units within Athabasca University. Now I have a really deeper appreciation for the value of building relationships and maintaining reciprocal relationships in the heritage field, and the multifaceted benefits of working with communities, local museums and historic sites, and NGOs, Indigenous, local, provincial, and territorial governments, and national government and international organizations. So layers of collaborations and layers of partnerships that enrich the experience. I want to take this moment to thank everyone wholeheartedly for being part of this project. It was a real great team effort. So I cannot take credit for this project just by myself. My key takeaway from the project on how to successfully plan, coordinate, and host such a collaborative project is respect and acknowledge your own organizations and your partners' core values. Be mindful of the priorities of all partners and collaborators. Listen and respect different worldviews and ways of knowing and doing things. Be flexible, adaptable, and receptive to new and different ideas. And be ready to continue to learn from everyone involved. In the end, we are all lifelong learners. There is never an end to our learning. So perhaps I could stop here, Nishi, in case there are any questions or comments, and I can continue after.
Sure. So does anyone have questions so far? Feel free to just pop them in the chat box if you do. Okay, Alka, I can see that you have a few questions. Oh, just waiting for it to pop up. There we go. How many of the participants were Indigenous and where were they from?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Elka. Because this is an international training, and we had to be respectful of ICOM's processes in terms of selecting participants based on the applications that ICOM received. I would say those colleagues who joined from African countries were Indigenous participants. And we had participants from Asia. So I don't know about their ancestors or heritage, but we had a Canadian participant with Indigenous roots. So the participants came, I should have prepared the list, but we had colleagues, and it would be really bad if I miss someone, but we have people from India, Malawi, Italy. See, I can't remember the exact list of countries in Canada, but we had 16 participants, including the teaching team from 12 countries. And so the Indigenous students participating from Canada, I don't think they were Indigenous. But the important thing was that we had young artists, Indigenous artists, who came and visited several times, and they showed everyone how to do, for example, finger weaving or doing some Indigenous arts and crafts. So we had the young Indigenous artists and members of community to come and be part of the training, even if they were not formal participants. So, yeah. I'm very grateful to our elder in residence who worked with 3 other elders, and they prepared a recording specifically for the international participants. It was, I think, a 1 hour or maybe more than 1 hour recording. So 4 elders speaking about Indigenous cultural matters around the kitchen table, which is really important, and just addressing the international summer school. So it was developed specifically for them before they came in. And then we had the discussions after. So it was very, very inspiring and informative. The elders, I don't remember exactly the ones that we had the conversation with, but they were from different nations. I know Cree and Métis for sure, and they were from Alberta and Saskatchewan. Thank you, Elka.
Okay, if anyone else has further questions, feel free to keep popping them in the chat and we can address them towards the end.
Sounds good. I can quickly talk about another project or initiative that is important to me on different levels that I can talk about it. It's okay. I don't see any other questions. So okay, we're good. So I wanted to mention another project that could be viewed as an intentional way of preparing the next generation of heritage professionals, and as an example of building and sustaining meaningful relationships and partnerships. The Edmonton Roundtable. The Edmonton Roundtable was a project funded by the Canada Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, SSHRC, and in partnership with Royal Alberta Museum, Edmonton Heritage Council, Pimachu Aki Corporation, and with support from Athabasca University's Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences and our research office. The project and its success is because I see it as a way of transferring knowledge and experience from one generation to the next, because it involved my own mentor, myself, and my research assistant and students. So you can see there were 3 different groups involved in this larger project. The selected team, which was working together at the intersection of culture and nature, a World Heritage context, stemmed from the designation of 2 World Heritage sites in Canada, Pimachu Aki in Manitoba and Ontario, which was listed on the World Heritage site, on the World Heritage list in 2018 as a mixed cultural and natural World Heritage site, and Asinap Writing on Stone in Alberta, which was designated as a World Heritage Site in 2019 as a cultural World Heritage Site. So both these sites are traditional and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples, featuring interwoven cultural, spiritual, and landscape values. The Roundtable's particular interest was in the operational management of these special places. Traditionally in Canada, cultural and natural heritage sites are managed under different departments and through different mechanisms. The Roundtable provided an opportunity to revisit how heritage sites with intersecting cultural and natural values can be managed in a more collaborative environment and across administrative boundaries. The Edmonton Roundtable was modeled on the highly successful Montreal Roundtables created by the Canada Research Chair on Built Heritage at the University of Montreal, where I did my postdoctoral research and work with my mentor. Each year, the chair selected a difficult topic of current interest to researchers and practitioners, and the proceedings of those roundtables were published annually. So we have 14 years of roundtable discussions and proceedings stored on the website. They're really interesting. There are really interesting proceedings, and lots of good papers are printed there. It was the first time, however, that such a roundtable with a focus on World Heritage matters took place in Western Canada. The timing was also significant, as the Convention concerning the protection of world cultural and natural heritage, the World Heritage Convention, celebrated its 50th anniversary in 2022. The Edmonton Roundtable invited 30 Canadian and international experts and emerging professionals in heritage conservation and related disciplines who work in public, private, academic, and non-governmental organizations. Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers also participated and shared knowledge. What the participants had in common was experience in managing places or being involved in places at the nexus of cultural and natural heritage. So we were interested at that intersection. Students from Athabasca University, University of Lethbridge, and University of Montreal participated in the roundtable, and they came from different disciplinary backgrounds and cultural backgrounds as well. They presented their research projects and learned from the discussions. So over 3 years at the roundtable, the speakers were encouraged to share their specialized knowledge as a means of framing the debate. In the spirit of a roundtable, each participant was expected to join in a frank exchange of views. I'm so grateful that we had a couple of knowledge keepers from Pimachu and Aki, and we also had information from an elder from Blackfoot for the Writing on Stone project. And it was a really interesting and important session happening in Edmonton, in Alberta, because oftentimes we feel that what's happening in Eastern Canada is not translated in Western Canada, and most often Western provinces feel that they are isolated. So this project was one small step towards bridging that gap that exists between universities, between academics and professionals, and also sharing the experiences that took place many years ago in Montreal, in Quebec, with Albertans. So I wanted to also talk about this project because what I learned working with my mentor as a Canada researcher on built heritage, I could talk about it and transfer my learning to my students and also engage them in the conversations. And to me, that's invaluable. And I'm grateful for the opportunities that I've had. And I want my students to have similar opportunities as much as possible. So I can stop now in case there is any questions or comments.
Any questions, anyone? Nope. So Alka asks if the Edmonton Roundtable is all online, or was it all online, I should say.
Thanks, Elka. So when we submitted the funding proposal back in 2019, Writing on Stone was not designated on the World Heritage List yet. And the plan was to host it in person. Then the pandemic hit. So I had to work with our research office and our partners to postpone the event twice. So I had to request them to carry over the funding that was allocated to this project to next fiscal year, because my mentor and I were really serious. We wanted to have an in-person roundtable, and we were successful. So the roundtable was indeed in person at the Royal Alberta Museum. So we had the advantage of being within that environment and visiting Manitou, the indigenous, the significant the stone house at the Royal Alberta Museum. So we had the event in person, but we had two international speakers, one from ICOM and the other one from World Heritage Center, who was involved in World Heritage Center. They had to participate virtually because of the complications with travel at that time. So that was very fortunate that we could host it in person after the pandemic.
And do you remember how many people participated?
So the roundtable is only by invitation. So it's not an open forum. And all the invitees, speakers, and those who acted as rapporteurs, for example, or students, they were involved as guest speakers. So it's close to 30. We had to cap it because of the logistical matters and also funding matters. We had to limit it to 30 because we wanted to bring in as many people and provide financial support. We were very fortunate that we had financial and in-kind support from Parks Canada, for example, from Edmonton Heritage Council, from Athabasca University. So it was a funded project with limited invited attendees. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned the complex logistics, which sort of touches on this next question that we have from Amy. They write, for your summer school, you said you did lots of visits to sites to learn what they were doing. Were these sites around Athabasca, or did you need to go to Edmonton? Or did you, in fact, hold the whole school in Edmonton or somewhere else? Just thinking about the logistics must have been complex.
That's a really great question, because we often just attend events and meetings and forget about all the logistics that happen behind it. To be honest, we worked on this project for 2 years, and the logistics were very difficult. So Athabasca University has its main campus in Athabasca, but we had to make a difficult decision to host the training in St. Albert. If you check Google Maps, you'll note that St. Albert is attached to Edmonton, and it's only an hour and a half away from Athabasca, town of Athabasca. So it was a good situation. We were mindful of costs that it would, cause for participants, because not all participants received funding. For the International Summer School, not everyone is eligible for funding. So many of them have to cover their travel costs and then registration fees, things like that. So we had to make the decision to host the event in St. Albert, not Edmonton, but close enough to Edmonton International Airport, because we were mindful of that commitment to zero waste and sustainability and sustainable development goals. We wanted participants to walk from their residence, the place that we found for a very reasonable price, to walk to the classroom, which was an old house. It's the little white house in St. Albert, within 5 minutes, so walking distance. And everything around St. Albert was accessible walking distance. So that was an intentional decision to be close to amenities, to places that we needed to be and go. When we went to the Poundmakers Lodge, we took a city bus. So we had to work with City of St. Albert's transportation. We didn't want to use different cars just to help with the climate action commitment. And we did a group trip, half-a-day trip to Poundmakers Lodge. We actually took a coach to Tyrrell Museum. It was a long day trip to Tyrrell Museum. So we were away for 15 hours or so. I can't remember. It was a long day. So we did the trips, being more like efficient and sustainable, used public transport, but everything else was just walking distance. And that was the reason we selected St. Albert. And the other thing is that we have very generous and supportive colleagues in St. Albert who work closely with Athabasca University, and they provided those spaces in kind to us. So we did not pay them technically. So it was a partnership, a true partnership. So lots of relationship building and conversations with colleagues. So we use the classroom for free. Yes, and if I can add here, Amy, we try to avoid using any disposable utensils or plates or cups or things like that. We tracked the garbage that we produced every day. We tried to learn about, we had a tracking system. We tried to monitor our waste and be mindful of how much waste we produce, and also did separate, cyclables, compostable, things like that. So for that reason, we just used water bottles and cups that were donated to us by Athabasca University, and like everyone contributed plates and mugs. So we didn't really produce any disposable waste, and we tracked them. So we had a good way of monitoring that. We were really trying to aim for zero waste. It wasn't possible, especially when we had the international dinner. It was a difficult day for us to monitor all the waste and packaging, but we avoided packaging or buying stuff that needed to produce lots of waste. It was really a great experience doing that. And it's because of ICOM's commitment, and they have produced guidelines and materials in support of that initiative. So they have templates and frameworks for that.
That is an incredible commitment to sustainability on top of just all the other logistics of putting something like that together.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions? We are close to sort of wrapping up today's talk. Doesn't seem like it. That's how thorough your talk was. There are no questions.
Thank you so much. And I mean, my email address and contact information is available online. So if anyone has any questions, please, or if I can provide any additional information, or if they want to partner with Athabasca University, please feel free to reach out. And
yes, thank you so much, Dr. Shabnam, for this wonderful talk. And one of the things that stood out to me is it's so clear when you were talking about these projects, how much you want to share with your students and have them actively be involved in what you're doing. So that is incredible.
Thank you. And I thank everyone for participating today, for being here today. This is great. And I want to thank ICOM Canada again for this recognition. It means a lot to me, and that has given me a mandate to continue what I'm doing and be hopeful that it's making a small change in the right direction. Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I'm reading all the notes here. Thank you.
Okay, Vanessa, should we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'm just sharing like Shabnam's email as well in the chat. So if anyone needs it, you can.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Yep, I'll just end the meeting. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.